Hiya, folks. This is Rick Emmett of Triumph.
This is Mark Merrill, also known as Johnny B. Bad.
Hi, this is a best-selling author. I threw the best-selling in there. Best-selling author Dick Wybrow.
I'm Melanie from Second Shooter.
This is Jeff with Second Shooter.
Hey everybody, it's Bryan Allen from Bridges Ablaze.
Hey, this is Sammy Lee, drummer of the band Red Rain.
Yo guys, it's Mark McKay.
Hey, this is Frank Fletcher.
Hola amigos, this is Billy Sheehan.
Hey guys, this is John Karabi.
What's up everybody, it's Logan from All the Pretty Things.
Hey guys, it's Leva Leone.
What's up guys, Cassandra Carson here from Paralandra and the Life Project.
My name's Reggie, and you are listening to the Weekly Pour podcast. Thanks so much for joining the most amazing twosome out there.
It's time once again for the Weekly Pour, the show that knows everything about absolutely nothing. Here are your hosts, TBT and Ace.
What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Weekly Pour podcast. Now, let me ask you a question. Summer of '69, Bryan Adams. Don't Forget Me When I'm Gone, Glass Tiger. Touch of Poison from Lita Ford. Ragdoll, Aerosmith. And Tease Me, Please Me from the Scorpions. What do these songs and so many others have in common? The answer is Jim Vallance. Called a master by Aerosmith's Steven Tyler, Jim's accolades describe the highest level of artistic and commercial achievement and include induction into the Canadien Songwriters Hall of Fame and the British Columbia Entertainment Hall of Fame, just to name a couple. We're thrilled to welcome songwriter, arranger, and producer Jim Vallance to this episode of the Weekly Pour podcast. Welcome, Jim. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us, and we hope you enjoy the next hour.
Thank you. I enjoyed your intro. There's quite a few of my friends on there.
Excellent. We spent a whole lot of time putting that together. Took hours. So starting off, you're located in New York right now, right?
I am.
Okay, good deal. I will skip the whole how's the weather, what did you do yesterday? We've done a lot of research on you today and for the past couple of weeks once Ace told me that we got you hooked up. And yeah, we're going to skip that stuff and we're going to get right into it. I'm sure that Ace will jump right in.
Yeah, where at in New York, first of all?
Sorry?
Where at in New York? I always ask people from New York because
73rd and Broadway.
So you're in the city.
I am on the right on the 2-3 express train.
Yeah, been there one time. Visited Manhattan one time.
Yeah,
not the best day, not the best day, but we made the best of it.
Yeah, just avoid Times Square. It's a nightmare.
We drove right by it. Well, we didn't drive.
Good.
But we were on a bus. Right by it. Right by it. But you've been a collaborator for many just mega stars. That's one of the first things I noticed. I'm a bit of a songwriting nerd in the sense that I read credits.
Yeah.
At the end of songs, and I read liner notes and things like that. And your name would always come up, of course, in the Bryan Adams stuff, but then it would pop up in other places. If you would, maybe go back to the beginning a little bit and tell us how you got into songwriting. I know you were in a band in Prism, a band called Prism, in the late 70s, and wrote songs for them, arranged some music, I think, for them.
I did, yeah. I played drums on the album.
Right. So how did all that get started?
I mean, to go right back to the very beginning, I was born in May 1952, but life really began in February 1964 when I saw the Beatles on TV, and I was 11 years old. It just completely scrambled my brain. I knew right then that's what I wanted to do, and begged my parents for a guitar or a drum kit or anything at all. It took a couple of years, but they finally gave in. And then I got a tape recorder too for Christmas or a birthday, a little tiny reel-to-reel. And so now I had a guitar and I had a tape recorder, and I just kind of needed to record stuff. So I wrote my own little things to put on tape. They were very rudimentary and early days, but I got interested in writing, playing, recording, just about almost all at the same time. And then that just continued through my teens and kept trying to write songs, listening a lot, like you were saying, reading the credits and, finding out who was doing what. Like, I love the Monkees, but you look at the credits and they didn't write their own songs. They had a whole team of people behind them. And so I got real curious about that. And of course, Lennon and McCartney were writing their own songs, Mick Jagger, Keith Richards. So I was really drawn to that when I knew that bands were actually writing songs, or there were people who were writing songs for bands. And it just increased my interest in wanting to do that.
So you were always wanting to at least write songs, if not play drums in a band. Which would you say took a precedent, the writing the songs or playing the drums in a band?
I mean, it kind of evolved, together and apart. I mean, my first band in high school, I was a drummer. So drums became my main instrument. I mean, I play guitar and piano, not super well, but, to write songs, you only need to know 4 or 5 chords, and I know 6, maybe. But drums was my sort of bread and butter all through my teens, and then into my 20s even. I was a session drummer in Vancouver, playing on McDonald's commercials and whatever work I could get around the city. But always writing songs, but had nowhere to go with them. So I had all these songs I'd written. I'm not a singer. I had no aspirations to be an artist. So when Prism came along, and they said, who's got some songs? I do, so I ended up being the main writer in that band just because I'd been writing and cataloging all this music for, all through my teens and early 20s.
Right. And you're not the first person, artist-wise, that was, saw the Beatles on Ed Sullivan and was instantly just blown away by that whole experience. Gosh, I can't even name how many people talk about that. Paul and Gene, Kids, they talk about it a lot as a huge influence on them. And then the same thing, you mentioned they write their own songs. And back to Gene and Paul and Kiss, they kind of modeled their songwriting aspect after that, because you had everyone's name on every song. Like the Beatles, that was kind of their thing. Yeah. So you're not the first person to say that. So the Beatles obviously were a big influence. Do you feel like you tried to write in any particular way, like Lennon or McCartney or anything like that, early on?
Yeah, I mean, I tried it all. I mean, if you listen to my early music, it's actually probably so close to existing songs that it would be, considered plagiarism. So my early songs were just really copying other people's songs, and then you learn to sort of, cast a wider net and be careful not to copy too closely. But if I listen back to some of my way early tapes, I was also a big fan of the band, Robbie Robertson's writing. And I've got some early songs that, they've never been released and never will be, but, trying to sound like the band and sing like Lee Von Helm. And then for a while I was into prog rock and wrote a few things. I was a big Yes fan around Close to the Edge album. And I did some writing back then that was sort of, an attempt at prog rock that was way too close. I mean, it sounds more like Yes than would be permitted. But so I literally, you just copy your heroes and then kind of slowly, put your own thing into it. And that's how I learned to be a songwriter, just literally trial and error.
Right, because eventually the copying becomes an homage. Eventually it's like, oh, that sounds like Led Zeppelin, or that sounds like the Beatles, that kind of thing. After you were in prison for the first record as a band member.
I was.
But, and this website you have is exhaustive in information. It's fantastic. So whoever put this together with you deserves a big pat on the back, because it's great. But the second record, you're not on the second record or in the band at that point, right?
No, I'd quit the band after the first album. We did an album, and then we went on tour, and that's when I discovered I hated touring, because we were a new band, and there were no perks. We were 5 guys in a rental car, eating microwave tacos from gas stations. It was really no fun. So I did one tour, and then it's similar to Brian Wilson and the Beach Boys. He decided to step away from the band and just go into kind of a background kind of a role, writing and arranging. So I continued with Prism writing, not as much as I had on the first album, but I did continue contributing to their albums. And we all remain friends, I mean, even to this day. But I was not cut out to be a touring band member.
You even say at one point you were embarrassed to be in a rock band, which is an interesting statement. And you came up with a stage name. Yeah,
I don't think that quote. I mean, there's stuff on Wikipedia. There's stuff out there that people say I said.
If it's on the internet, it had to be true.
Yeah, I never said I was embarrassed to be in a rock band. Someone else must have said that on my behalf.
I pulled it right from the website, and I thought that was an odd thing to say. But I don't know if it was because you were playing the Dixieland music before that. you talk about playing Dixieland music with a band in the streets.
We buffed on the streets of Vancouver. We just played on the street corners for coins.
Which I don't know who decided that Dixieland was going to be what you wanted to play in Canada, but that's pretty cool.
We tried everything. Like I said, cast a wide net. I mean, you never know what's going to work.
Right, and you don't. And even that first Prism record isn't exactly the same as the second one, right? The second one's got a little more punch to it, doesn't it?
I think so, yeah. I mean, again, bands grow and evolve. So, and it was a different band. By the time that Prism did the second album, there was quite a turnover of personnel. I mean, I quit and two other people joined. So it was, in some ways, it was a different band.
Right. I mean, at one point you changed lead singers, I believe, which that's a big thing right there.
Way early on. Yeah.
Right. And I'm new to just listening to this, just digging into your background. But I got into the second one just yesterday. There was some good stuff on there. I really liked quite a bit of it. Specifically, I was on the first record, I was trying to hear you play drums because I wanted to see how you sounded. So after Prism, though, where did we go after Prism?
Well, so I quit Prism in 1977, and then just went back to my, previous job, which was playing drums on McDonald's commercials and wedding receptions on the weekend, that sort of thing. And then one day I was in a music store in Vancouver, and I ran into this 18-year-old kid who was just kind of hanging around. And I was introduced to him, and Bryan Adams. And he was, he had quit school. He was living with his mom and just kind of hanging around. He didn't have a whole lot going on, and neither did I. So we exchanged phone numbers and got together a couple of days later and wrote a song the first day and the second day and the third day. And we just kept going. I mean, I met him in January 1978. We worked really hard at our songwriting, and we didn't really get any traction until Bryan's third album in 1983. So, that was a long gestation period. We worked hard with not a lot to show for it for a bunch of years until things started to come together.
What made you stick with Bryan that long? I'm trying to look it up, but the first record, wasn't that more of a dance record?
Not really. Bryan did a dance single really early on. Again, he was still a teenager. His real voice hadn't quite arrived yet. The Bryan Adams we know today. He was singing in a different style, and he had come out of a band called Sweeney Todd, which was not really prog rock, but I think the vocal style was more in the vein of, say, Supertramp or Yes. It wasn't, Rod Stewart, Don Henley, which is more of a direction he went later. So when I first met him, he was still trying to figure out who he was as an artist. And we did a dance single. And it was a fairly big hit in the clubs, even in New York. It did quite well. But then by the time we got to the first album, we were steering more towards pop. And then by the second and third album, it was, full on rock and roll when Bryan's, true voice arrived.
Was it just the motivation to want to succeed that kept it going? Because I mean, you're talking by the third album before really starting to hit it. Is that what it was? Just that motivation and that drive to not give up that just kept you guys going in that direction?
Well, I mean, to be honest, we didn't have a plan B. I mean, when you decide on music for a career, I mean, you're stepping off the ledge. I remember when I was 18, graduating high school, I had no interest in college. I just wanted to be a musician. And my parents were horrified, like, you can't make a living at that. I said, well, I want to try, and they weren't thrilled. And I don't want to say they weren't supportive, but they really just didn't buy it. They didn't buy it at all. So I went out into the world and literally starved, all through my late teens and into my early 20s, just trying to make a living at it. Like I said, playing at bar mitzvahs and wedding receptions and, any work you could get, $25 for a weekend type of thing, and hoping I could make my rent at the end of the month. So by the time I met Bryan, I'd had a little bit of success with Prism, but now I'm back on my own again with no real plan and, nothing to fall back on. So, I think to pursue a music career, I think you have to be prepared for, rejection and disappointment and even failure, but you just keep going because you believe. And I really, once Bryan and I kind of got together, I believed in him as an artist and as a talent, and I mean, he was just unstoppable. Just being in a room with him was like the energy was so intense. You could not believe that he wasn't on the way to somewhere. We just didn't know how long it was going to take or how quick or whatever, but we just kept going, and we felt we were getting better. Like each album, the songs got better. We got better as writers. Bryan got better as an artist. We gathered better people around us, like Bob Clearmountain, the engineer producer, and Bryan moved from the Canadian record company to the Los Angeles record company of A&M, and we got more international support down there. So you could kind of see it growing, even though it's like watching grass grow. It's very slow, but check back in a week and it's, you can see the difference. So we just hung in for that first 5 years when we didn't have a whole lot to show for it, but we believed. That it was all about believing.
Right, and he would have had to have seen something in you, and vice versa, for this to work.
Yeah,
obviously.
we just clicked. I mean, literally, right from the first day, the very first day we got together, there was just something about our, common influences and our work ethic. I mean, we worked hard, and we were not afraid to work hard, and we never stopped working hard. It's not easy. It's not easy.
No, and at this point, you're still in the songwriter mode. He's the performer.
No. Oh, he was a full-on writer. I mean, he was extremely gifted. So we co-wrote 50-50 right from day one. But he was the performer. Yeah.
Right. That's what I meant. He was. You were still in the background role. While this thing's going on.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, before things are hitting, you guys are trying to make ends meet by also songwriting for other people or whatever you can do, right?
Yeah, early on, that was a real big boost for us. So like I said, I met him in 78, and we still hadn't got a whole lot happening. But in 1982, the phone rings one day, and my wife answers, and she goes, "Jim, it's Michael Jackson." I went, "What?" So I go, "Hello?" It was, "Hello, this is Michael James Jackson, Canadian record producer." And because he was Canadian, he was aware of me and Bryan. And he said, "Do you have any interest in writing a song for Kiss?" Because he was producing their next album. And yeah, we were way interested. So long story short, we ended up writing 2 songs for that album with, I think, both with Gene Simmons. And that was a big boost for us early in our writing career. And again, gave us that extra wind in our sails to just keep going.
Yeah, that was an interesting read on the website when I was going through, like Ace was talking about, you can get through 12 pages in 2 weeks because there's just so much info. But reading about the Kiss thing, I had to chuckle just because of the extra verse that needed to be added, for credit's sake, we'll say.
I mean, in fairness, I mean, if you want a song on a Kiss album, the band members are going to want a piece of it. So yeah, Brian and I wrote a song, the two of us, and then Gene said, "I think it needs a third verse." And Brian and I said, "Oh, no, it's fine the way it is. No. It needs a third verse," which he wrote.
Oh, okay.
And it was all fair. He didn't take any more credit than was deserved. So,
I think, and I knew this long ago that you guys had written War Machine and Rock and Roll Hell, right? Those are the two.
Yeah.
That's by far and away my favorite Kiss record, Creatures of the Night. And when I saw that you guys had collaborated on that record, that was just always such a shock. Not that you couldn't do it, but you didn't expect it. And, you're like, man, this makes it even cooler to know that Bryan Adams and Jim Vallance have, collaborated with Kiss on this fantastic record, because it's a great record. And Bryan has even released his own versions of those two songs now. They're out now.
Recently, yeah.
And those are new recordings, right? He just recorded them recently. Those aren't old demos or anything, right?
Yeah.
Right. So that's a big boost for you. And do you get more work from there?
Well, I think that's always the case. I think every time you have a bit of success, more people, and when I say people, I mean people in the industry, people, managers, record companies, producers, people start to notice, and they go, "Oh, maybe we'll ask them for a song." So yeah, it really did. I mean, that put us on the map, and then we started getting asked to write songs for other people, and it kind of, so then we had almost 2 careers, writing for Bryan and then, writing for other people. So it kept us really busy all through the early to mid 80s.
Right, which in the meantime you're working on getting these albums going with Bryan. I Remember was a standout single. I love that song.
Yeah.
That to me almost has the sound that we hear later on Cuts Like a Knife. Lonely Nights, that's a fantastic song. I play that song all the time. And those were things that were getting on the radio eventually, especially Lonely Nights, right? That eventually was getting you guys some airplay, not just in Canada, but a little bit here in the States, right? And then Cuts Like a Knife comes out, and things start really taking off.
That was 1983. Yeah.
Right.
That was the album that really started, to make things happen.
So did you know that it was going to be good when you went in writing this, or how did you feel about the writing sessions for that record?
Well, I mean, like I said, I think as the years went on and album to album to album, we always tried to up our game and write better. I mean, you never go into a room and say, "Today, let's write a really bad song," but nor do you go into a room and write a good song every day. I mean, we've got hundreds of songs that'll never see the light of day because they didn't, rise to our standards. So, you might write 4 or 5 songs, and then the 5th one is the one you go, "Yeah, this belongs on the album." So you need to kind of police yourself, like set standards and then stick to them. And the song isn't finished till it's finished, and it's not good till it's good. You mentioned Summer '69 in the introduction. I mean, we rewrote that song 3 times before we thought we got it right. And even then we weren't really sure. It almost didn't go on the album. We still weren't sure we had gotten it right. And, is it now 45 years later when I hear it on the radio? I can't remember what we didn't like about it. But at the time, we were kind of all bent out of shape. It's not ready. It's not right.
and I find that funny. There's always that song that a band either needs another song for the album. The producer says you need another song, and they come up with the hit. Or there's one like what you're just talking about where we're not sure, let's not put it on there. And then you change your mind back and forth. And that song is synonymous with Bryan Adams. I spoke to two people today, way younger than I am, and told them that I was going to have you on the show. And, and of course, Jim Vallance is not a household name, but Bryan Adams is. And I said, well, do you know Bryan Adams? No. But I said, how about Summer of '69? They start singing the song. They know that song. It's synonymous with you and especially with Bryan because he sings it. You said you write a lot of songs. Is there a process where how long does it take you, let's say, to write one good song? Are you sitting a day? Are you revisiting every 2 days? And do you ever take a song, throw it to the side, and revisit it years later?
I think we have. Yeah, I can't think of which one. I mean, that doesn't often happen, but yeah, there's been a few cases of that. Well, hang on, Aerosmith. We didn't come back and rewrite it, but there was some Aerosmith stuff I wrote with Stephen and Joe in like 1987 that wasn't deemed good enough for the album back then. And then 30 years later, they decided they had another listen and they released it. So it wasn't like we went back and rewrote it. But like I said, Summer '69, we started it and we spent maybe 2 or 3 days. And it wasn't even called Summer '69. That wasn't even the song title. It was called Best Days of My Life. And we left it for about a month and came back and looked at it again and then did some more work on it. And then I think we went even back, like I said, a third time. So that was a song that if you really stretched it out from the day we started till the day we deemed it finished, it would have been a few months. But trying to think of a song like Rag Doll that I wrote with Aerosmith. On the first day that I met them, Stephen and Joe came over to my studio and we just had a quick chat, got acquainted, picked up our guitars, and just started jamming. So that was like lunchtime. And by dinner time, we had pretty much that song sketched out, not the lyrics. And it was called Ragtime. It wasn't called Rag Doll. But there's an example of like in one day, we got most of the song done. And then the next day, Stephen and I just sat at the picnic table in my backyard and sketched out the lyrics. And it was still called Ragtime. And it wasn't until about 2 weeks later that we changed the title to Rag Doll. So, you're always, trying to make it better. But you also need to know when you're finished. You can keep, changing forever. I mean, I've worked with some artists. One artist in Vancouver who I wrote with years ago. She was really talented, but we wrote a song and I thought it was really good. And then she went away and I thought she was going to record it, but her producer was also a songwriter and he said, let's do some more. And they wrote more and more and more. And they kind of took the song up over the hill and down the other side. So, it was better the first time it was finished and not as good the second time it was finished. So again, you need to know when you're done.
Right, because you could overdo it.
Really,
you could overdo it in production as well. You mentioned Ragdoll, and that seems to me like the most eclectic thing for you to ever write. How do you feel about that? Do you feel like you have these straight up rock songs with Bryan on Reckless, and then you have this bouncy song with Aerosmith that sounds like Aerosmith, but I wouldn't recognize you in that song at all.
Well, I serve the artist. So again, if you want to make a living at songwriting, you've got to get songs on a record. The record's got to sell, and then eventually you get paid and you can buy groceries and afford your rent. If you get real precious about who you are and what you do, and it's like, I'm not going to write something that sounds like Aerosmith. I'm going to show Aerosmith, what I can do. That's not how it works at all. So When I'm with a band, and I'm a chameleon, so I've written, for soft artists, maybe not the most appropriate word, but say, like Michael Bublé and Anne Murray. And I've written for heavy artists like Scorpions, Kiss, Alice Cooper. So you just, Ozzy, who I adore, what a lovely guy. And so you go in a room with an artist and you climb inside their head. It's like you go, what would Ozzy want to say? Even though you're in the room with him, you're in his world now. And there's a couple of things you want to have happen. One is you want to write a song that you like. You want to make sure Ozzy likes it. And you want to make sure it sounds so much like Ozzy that it gets on the record. So there's a whole kind of a strategy or game to play. And whether it's Michael Bublé or the Scorpions, it's still music. It's a song, it's got lyrics, a verse, a chorus. And Paul Anka did a cover of Heaven. So you can take almost any song and do it in any style, So if you're writing with Ozzy, you're writing in an Ozzy style. It's really that simple. And again, I don't mean to say it's easy, but it's
right.
It's a strategy.
Right, and you wrote with Ozzy. One of them was "I Want You."
Yeah,
and that in this way, and I read what you wrote, and you can tell us about it. But I read what you wrote on here about writing that song. But when I first heard that song on Osmosis, I think it is. Love that song because it's so intense and it's heavy and it's intense and all this. But the story about writing it's a bit comical, isn't it?
Well, yeah, we just, we sketched out the song. It didn't have a lot of lyrics, but we had a melody and a structure for the song. So we just sat down. I don't have the lyric in front of me, maybe you do, but we just sat down and we wrote way too many lyrics. Like way more than we needed. And the more we wrote, we actually started to laugh, and just to crack each other up, we'd write something really silly, stuff that never ended up in the song. But it was a fun session. Ozzy's a really funny guy. So, we just were sort of entertaining each other. But at the end of the day, we got serious also and finished the song. But some of the lyrics were just like jokes.
Right. And just getting each other going, and it's probably a good way to break the ice if you don't know an artist very well. It's something like that. You're cutting up a little bit, you're getting everything loose, and then you get down to work.
Yeah, that's true. Even with Stephen and Joe, like the first day they came to my house, we didn't start writing right away. We actually had some tea and cookies and talked for probably an hour about common influences like Led Zeppelin and the Beatles and the Stones, and talked about our kids and all kinds of common stuff, to get to know someone as another human, as another person. And then once you've sort of established a little bit of camaraderie, then you pick up your guitars and it just feels a little more natural. But these are wonderful people. I feel so blessed to have spent time with Ozzy and Stephen and Alice, and they're really special people. I really feel lucky.
It's one of the stories that I was reading on the website as well. I was flipping through all of the Aerosmith songs, and then I get to Other Side. And this kind of goes a lot with what you were talking about earlier, how, when you're collaborating with that artist, you're just writing and getting things done. Well, the story in here is that you had it done, sent it by mail on a cassette. We remember what those are. And then by the time you got it back, everything was all mixed up. And, for what it's worth, you weren't pleased to begin with.
Yeah, well, I was in Vancouver. Stephen was in Boston at his house, and I wrote a track and recorded it. So no lyrics, no melody, just a structure. And it had a verse and a chorus and a verse and a chorus. And this is before email and before MP3s. So literally, I put it on a cassette, and put it in an envelope and mailed it to Boston. And Stephen opened the envelope, put it in his Walkman, and he sang along with it, recorded his vocal, put the cassette in the mail, and sent it back to me. And I played it, and now it's got lyrics and a melody. And I went, no, you got it wrong. You sang a verse over my chorus and a chorus over my verse. He misunderstood my intention, and I was quite disappointed. And we're on the phone, and Stephen says, no, listen again. I think I did it right, and he was right. I mean, it just took me a little, a minute or two to kind of get into what he was hearing. But yeah, again, you just have to be open-minded and be open to, collaboration really is, 2-3 people in a room. And it's not about being precious about your idea, it's about the best idea wins, and then the song is the best it can be. So as you bounce ideas around the room, it's all about how good can the song be. And in this case, it was just me and Stephen, and it was a long distance. But I didn't like what he did, and I listened again, and then I did like it.
It just amazes me because, you talk to people ask about a song, they'll ask a band, they'll ask an artist, whatever, and they'll say, this was based on, whatever life experience they had, when they went fishing with their grandpa or whatever. It amazes me going through your entire discography and every song that you've worked on, and whether it be lyrics or the composition. Where do all these ideas come from? Did you always have like a super unique like imagination to just pull things from, or does it just literally come natural to you?
It's a bit of a mystery. There's a great interview. I don't know if you've seen it. Ed Bradley. It's years and years ago. Ed Bradley interviewing Bob Dylan on 60 Minutes. It's a really great interview. And Ed says to Bob, how did you write all those early songs? And Bob says, I don't know. I don't know how I did that. It just kind of came to me. And, I couldn't say it better. It really is a mystery. You sit down in a room with another person or another 2 people, and you're staring at a blank piece of paper. And by the end of the day, you've got lyrics and a melody and, the beginnings, not always a finished song, but, begin the song. And you go home, you come back the next day, listen to it, and go, oh, no, yeah, that's worth finishing. But I can't explain it. I've just always liked doing that. I remember maybe a very early example of sort of validation maybe was, I remember in grade 5, I was living in a town in Canada, a small town called Kamloops, and there was all the schools in town, there was a competition to write a poem about Kamloops. I think it was the centenary of the city or something. And so I wrote what I thought was kind of a silly poem, and I submitted it, and I won. I won the contest, and it was like, oh wow, So I didn't do it to try to win. I just did it because it was fun, and then I got $5 for winning the contest, and I think that planted a seed. It was like, oh, I can do this. This is something I know how to do. And then after that, it's really all about seeing that blank page get filled up with lyrics. You just do it. And I don't mean to be flippant or, but it's a mystery even to me. I've been doing it for 50 years, and I still don't really understand how it happens. It just does.
Yeah, it's definitely a gift because I took a stab at it in bands that I've been in, and I am terrible at lyric writing. So yeah, it's definitely a gift. I have to ask you though, you wrote a song for BTO called Jamaica.
Yeah.
This literally happened just a few weeks ago. The wife and my daughter, we were driving somewhere, and we listened to Rick Springfield a lot. We love Rick Springfield.
Yeah.
Christina comes on, and I said, wait a minute, I remember something. that Jim Vallance wrote this song for BTO called Jamaica. I had never heard it though, but I knew that Rick had flip-flopped the lyrics around. So I had to hear what you wrote, which was, of course, it is what it sounds like. It's a song about, Jamaica. But Rick Springfield hears it and says, well, I like the music, but I don't like the lyrics. And he changes this whole thing. And, of course, you get a songwriting credit on it. And it's a great song. It sounds great. What do you think about that when something like that happens? Does it matter to you because you still get the songwriting credit, or are you offended at all, or do you care?
No, it's great. BTO didn't have a lot of success with that album, so I wrote the song all by myself called Jamaica, and BTO recorded it. And then 3 or 4 years later, Rick's guitar player played Rick this song, Jamaica, because he thought it had a great guitar part in it. And Rick liked it enough, but didn't like the title Jamaica. And as you said, he rewrote the lyric completely. So I was quite surprised that the first I heard about it was after it was already finished and recorded. But yeah, to have another song just, come out of the blue unexpectedly. Those are always nice surprises. And then that kind of opened the door too. Then I ended up writing some stuff with Rick after that. We became friends and co-writers. And apparently the song Christina, I think to this day, he still uses it as his encore closer when he does concerts.
Live, yeah. I've seen him 3 times and he's played it.
Yeah.
And it's a great song, and he kept everything but the lyrics. That's what's so funny. He didn't change.
Yeah.
He didn't change anything. He might have beefed it up a little bit instrumentally, a little bit. But
production wise, yeah. But same melody, same band track. He just rewrote the lyrics and called it Christina instead of Jamaica, and it's good. I'm really pleased.
Yeah, and being the songwriting nerd like I am on stuff like that, I'll listen to both, and I'll just sit there all the time and think about how this happened.
Well, your question was interesting. Like, was I offended or anything? I had a chat once with Paulson, and I'm a big fan of his. I read the Simon and Garfunkel's first hit, which was "Sounds of Silence." Sound of Silence. Yeah.
Yeah.
They'd recorded it as a folk duo, so it was just acoustic guitar and the 2 vocals, Simon and Garfunkel. And they released it, and nothing happened to it. It just died. And Paul had kind of given up on the music business. He'd gone to London, to England. I think he might have been busking around over there. And a producer in the USA took The Sound of Silence into the studio with the 2 vocals and acoustic guitar, added bass and drums and electric guitar, and released it without even asking Paul, without his permission at all. And I'd read this book where Paul is a real stickler for detail, like he's OCD, like everything has to be just perfect. And I asked him, what did you think when you first heard it? Because it was done without your permission, so you would have just heard this completely different version of your song. And he said he was really pleased. He says, how would you not be pleased having a record go to #1, So, same for me. Like, if someone wants to take one of my songs and make it different and make it better, I'm in.
Right. And then, of course, a lot of your songs get covered, and The Sound of Silence, was covered by Disturbed and turned into a huge hit, 40 years later or whatever. Yeah. What they did with it was amazing, just making it so much more dramatic.
Yeah, truly.
My wife plays that all the time. Now, she won't listen to the original at all, but she loves that version.
Yeah. Well, it's a good song. It's a really, really good song, and you can do anything with a good song.
Yeah, we talk about collaborations a lot and talk about how they're written and all that. And one thing that Ace and I were talking about just earlier today was that a lot of people don't even realize that the artist or the band or whatever, they're not always writing their songs. And I would totally encourage anybody that hasn't went to your website to definitely go to it, jimvallance.com, and go look at your all of your achievements in the way of songs and music, because there's stuff on there that even I, as a fan, I had no idea you were involved in. And I wrote some of them down, like LA Guns. I had no idea that you helped out with It's Over Now. And that's one of my favorite songs ever from LA
Wow, thank
Guns.
you.
Tease Me, Please Me from Scorpions, an absolute epic song that I absolutely love. And Ace already mentioned I Just Want You from Ozzy. But then there's stuff that was just a little bit earlier, as as rock was coming back in, late 70s, early 80s to the middle 80s, when you get Loverboy with Dangerous. And I listened to that again, I think it was just yesterday, and I was like, man, it's such a good song. And to give credit where credit is due, I can't find a song that you've done that I don't like. So that's all credit.
I can help
to
you with
you.
that. I can show you a few.
Well, it's a unique thing when people don't realize that. And then they look, and we've mentioned it on the show before, like, Islands in the Stream that Dolly and Kenny sang. It was written by the Bee Gees.
Yep.
And I encourage people to, pull out those notes, from your CD or look at the credits on your electronic version of the songs and actually look and see who actually did those. Because if you see, for instance, Gene Simmons, you're going to see the rest of the band. And then you might see somebody like Jim Vallance or a Bryan Adams or something like that. What does get me, though, is, and I get, people getting credit for taking part in it. But when you got 15 people on a list for a song, that just drives me insane.
Yeah, don't get me started. Yeah.
Pop songs are notorious for that. Notorious for that. It does 15 people write a 3-minute pop song, I think. That's just people wanting to get credit.
Yeah, you faded out a little bit there, Ace.
Yeah, we lost you for a second. We had
It'll come back.
I think we're good.
Yeah,
okay.
You see those. Go ahead and say what you said again, over.
I was saying it doesn't take 15 people to write a 3-minute pop song, in my opinion.
Yeah, I can't figure that at all.
And you said you can do anything with a good song. An example, kind of what we're talking about. What About Love? Big Heart single, but you didn't write that for Heart. That was written for a band called Toronto. Early on, right?
Canadian band. Yeah, I wrote that with them for one of their albums, and I think we wrote like 15 songs. And back in the day, there was only room for 12 songs on an album. And What About Love didn't make it. So it was an orphan. The song I actually forgot about it, completely forgot about it for a couple of years. And I think I wrote it with the band Toronto in 82, I think. And then in 1985, I get a phone call from Capitol Records in Los Angeles saying, congratulations, you've got the first single on the new Heart album. And I went, what song is that? And they said, What About Love? I went, what? How did you get that song? I had completely forgotten about it. And somehow it found its way to Capitol Records, who played it for Ron Nevison, who was producing Heart. And Ron played the song for Ann and Nancy, the Wilson sisters, and they hated it. They said, we're not recording this. We hate it. And Ron said, you know what, I'll make you a deal. Let's record it. If you still hate it, I promise I won't put it on the record. And long story short, they recorded it, they liked it, and it ended up being their comeback single.
And it's a good song. It's epic.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah. But they didn't, and that's fair, I think they like it now.
Well, to be fair, they were in a hard place at that point with the record company, and that's why Nevison was there to, pull something out of them, and they weren't going to be writing all their songs at that point in time. So, you're going to have to make it your own, is one way or the other, and that song has endured and endured, and it fits to me right in with everything else they do.
Yeah,
You know,
no, that was a real gift. I'm really pleased with that one.
In the world of in the digital era that we're in now, have you noticed like an uptick in I guess more recognizable songs that you've done in the past? Because I know, and I'll use this flat out, TikTok, that and a couple of the other platforms were started for people to just, do music things, whether it be lip syncing or just have it as background music or whatever. One of the songs that I can know that I've heard has been that song by heart. And you see a lot of videos, people doing things like that. I just wondered if you as the, as a composer, songwriter, all that, if you've noticed like any kind of uptick in, I don't want to say popularity, but we'll call it what it is, whether it be popularity or just more interest in your songs. I guess the residual checks would be the answer to that.
right.
I mean, I don't really keep track that much of. I mean, back in the day, I'm talking 1980s, 1990s. The business model was, really simple to understand. You made a record, it went into the store, people went to the store and bought the record, paid for it, took it home, and 6 months down the road, you got a royalty check. So if you sold one record, you got paid once. If you sold 1 million records, you got paid 1 million times. It was an understandable, transparent business model. I'm sure there was a little bit of maybe shenanigans going on in the background somewhere, but I think 90% we got paid what we were owed. I have no clue today. I don't understand Spotify. I don't understand TikTok. I don't know the business model. It's foreign to me. So I can't even answer your question. I don't know how it works. I mean, the royalty stream is still okay. And I have a couple of songs apparently that have surpassed the billion streams on Spotify. But you keep reading that, a billion streams and you get $1,000. It's like, I don't even know. I give up. I just, if a check arrives, I'm grateful, but I couldn't tell you where it came from or how or why. It's a mystery to me.
And to get a gold record in today's market is hard because it counts sales, streams, purchases, all this stuff. And it might take forever to get a gold platinum record. So, yeah, I don't understand it either. It was so much simpler back in the day.
Oh, good. I'm glad I'm not the only one.
No, you're not the only one. Real quick, because we're getting short on time, I want to ask you a little bit more about the Bryan Adams stuff with Reckless, because there was something lacking at one point when you recorded these early demos with a couple songs, like One Night Love Affair, Summer of '69 we talked about. I read an article a couple of weeks ago where Bryan says he felt like he was missing the rock. Where's the rock in some of these songs? Did you feel the same thing, that something was missing and you had to punch it up a little bit on a couple of those songs on that record?
I mean, that might have been what happened in the studio once they got in with Bob Clearmountain and the band. But, and I wasn't there for that. I wasn't part of the recording sessions. But no, Bryan and I mean, we wrote, I think we didn't have a lot of extra songs. In fact, we were kind of short on Reckless when it came to the end. Like I said, there's room for 12 songs on an album. I think we had 10. And then Summer '69 was a maybe, and then that went on. And then I think Run to You was a very last minute addition. We actually wrote Run to You for Blue Oyster Cult. If you know their song,
Right.
I Don't Fear the Reaper, with that guitar riff. So we thought, we'll write a riff, they'll love it. We wrote, Run to You and sent it to them, but they ended up not recording it. And so that song was just kind of hanging around. And I think it was Bob Clearmountain who said, why don't we put that on the record to get the song count up to 12 songs. But no, I don't remember, at least from my end, and just me and Bryan from the writing part of it, no conscious effort to rock a bit more, but maybe once Bob and Bryan got in the studio, maybe there were some conversations along those lines, but I wasn't part of that.
Well, and you mentioned the Blue Oyster Cult thing, but there's a bit of a more to that story because apparently you wrote it with them in mind, and they didn't use it. The manager calls you, right, and says they didn't like it or something like that.
Yeah,
But
we heard they didn't like
years
it.
later-
Yeah.
Yeah, but years later, what happened years later? What did you hear?
Well, I mean, actually, really recently, it was just a couple of months ago. So we sent the song to Blue Oyster Cult in 1984 maybe, yeah. And then we heard they didn't like it, so Bryan recorded it. And literally a couple of months ago, I'd never met him before, but Joe Boucher, who was the original bass player for Blue Oyster Cult, excuse me, sent me an email out of the blue and said, he said, I want to set the story straight. He said, we never even heard the song. He said,
Wow.
He said, our manager or our record company, someone might have heard it, but they didn't play it for us. Like, 40 plus years later, I find out it wasn't what I thought at all. And he says, I wish we had recorded it. He loved the song, but.
Yeah, no kidding.
So, I mean,
it's a great song.
Every song has a story. Like, that one, that's a great story. What About Love? That long, circuitous route to heart finding it. I mean, that's, one of the things I love as a fan. I mean, I'm just a nerd for the small print and just like you guys, the small print and the stories behind the songs. I mean, I live for that. I read voraciously about, Beatles and Stones and, all of those things. I'm always learning something new. So yeah, I love the stories.
What does the future hold for you right now? Are you still writing all the time and shopping songs, or are you just kind of going with the flow now?
Well, I mean, people say I'm 72, 73 real soon, and people say, are you retired? And I said, no, just tired. So, I did it for 50 years every day, and I still love music. I'm still a musician, but I'm not, full on. I'm not doing it like I used to. I'm not, chasing the next song cover or song project. So, I might be done, but I'm not saying retired yet. I'm not using that word yet.
Well, I'm sure it depends on what comes along. If someone comes along that you like working with, or someone you've never worked with, and I don't know who that would be. Maybe you could answer that question. Is there someone that you have never worked with that's still active that you'd like to work with?
Well, I mean, wouldn't it be great to write a song with Paul McCartney? But I don't think he needs any help.
But he's still active.
What's that?
He's still active.
Yeah, I mean, he's amazing. 80 something
Right.
and still touring, doing 3-hour shows. Remarkable.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we're getting short on time. We've got just a couple minutes. I had a couple other cursory things about the follow-up to Reckless, Into the Fire. Reckless sold 12 million copies, roughly.
Yep.
Into the Fire is a really good record in retrospect, but didn't do as well. Do you have any idea why maybe it didn't sell as well?
Well, I mean, that was one time we really did sit down, and Bryan and I, and talk about, let's do something different. So we had, each album had we got better as writers, and I think, to your point, I think each album rocked a bit more, and we didn't know where to go from Reckless. We'd kind of, rocked ourselves into a corner. And so we had to try something. Instead of trying to do something better, we decided to try and do something different. And so lyrically, all the songs on Reckless, and in fact, all the albums before, the lyric content was more kind of relationships, boys and girls and that sort of thing. And then on Into the Fire, we went more political, topical. We wrote a song about Chief Joseph, a Native American tribe. We wrote a song about the First World War called Remembrance Day. So we really stretched out lyrically. And I think we may have lost some of Bryan's fans in the process. We maybe changed a bit too much. And then after that, the next album after that, Bryan went back to more of a rock thing, with Mutt Lange, Waking Up the Neighbors. Good album.
Well,
Mutt's amazing. But yeah, I don't know. People look into the Fighters their favorite Bryan album. So, there's people who liked it. But yeah, it didn't sell as well as Reckless.
Right, and it's a good record. I will tell you though, as much as I was into music, that one flew under the radar for me in '87. I didn't know it was even out, and I think part of it was you still had that overhang from Reckless still on the radio, that sort of thing. So it's hard to even get
Reckless
the new
had
stuff.
a big footprint. Yeah,
It did.
It did everything that came after it. I mean, I think it's still Bryan's definitive album in many ways. Reckless.
Yes, and it probably still carries the bulk of his set. He says he's putting out a rock record coming up, and I hope so, like a real rock record, like not a clone of Reckless, but something in that vein. Because I've kind of lost my way with some of the stuff lately out there that he's done. So I hope it's accurate. I look forward to it. I'm excited about it.
Well, he's so good. I mean, I saw him perform not too long ago. And he sings better at 65 than he sang at 25. So he just gets better. I don't know how he does it, but he's a remarkable guy.
It's like a fine wine. We all just get better with age.
Yeah.
Well, listen, Jim, our time is up. I want to thank you so much for stopping by with us this week. I want to ask you if you would mind just holding on for just a second. I'm going to let everybody know that we'll be back next week. Please, if you haven't had a chance to actually go in and check out Jim, please go to his website, like we said again, jimvallance.com, and look at those tracks. Look at all the stuff that you have when you're listening to stuff. Check and see who those songwriters are. Check and see who some of those songwriters are, and you'd probably be surprised that some of your favorite songs from 70s, 80s, and 90s probably had this guy involved. Once again, I want to thank you, Jim, for joining us. Everybody, we'll see you next week, and thanks. This has been the Weekly Pour Podcast.